All right, guys, please welcome to the stage the studio head and directors of Kojima Production, Hideo Kojima.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. As promised, I have our new trailer. Take a look.
Don't you die on me, damn it!
He's dropping!
Intubate, now! Cardiac arrest, he's in VFib!
Clear!
The 2013 Game Developers Conference was one that rocked the internet, for myself and for millions of others who tuned in to witness the first trailer we would receive for Metal Gear Solid V. At that time, it was not certain to fans what this game would look like as a finalized product, but as you can see yourself from the trailer, the graphics looked incredible, and the story hooked me with a single viewing of what was to come. Later that year at E3 2013, Kojima Productions released another trailer for Metal Gear Solid V, the Red Band trailer, that would solidify the anticipation of fans, and for me personally, would spawn a desire for this game that was unlike any game before or since. Not for any nation, not for any ideology, not for justice, not for honor, not for power, not for the future, not for love, not for peace, only for revenge. The Red Band trailer opens on a powerful and incredibly cinematic note, showing gruesome imagery and painting a dark picture for what this game was willing to tell a story about: revenge. Hideo Kojima revealed himself that this game would complete the loop that is the story of Metal Gear Solid. In turn, we were promised to see how men became demons in this game. It was no secret to any fans of the series that the protagonist for several games, Big Boss, or Naked Snake, would eventually fall from a highly ambitious man with honorable intentions for the future to a shell of his former self, a terrorist who lusts for power and credibility for a systemic global power that he was previously fighting against, a man who would become the main antagonist of the entire franchise, and the players themselves would be working towards stopping once and for all the damage he caused to the world. This trailer, in this game, promised to show us how Big Boss broke bad. The Red Band trailer is the most viewed out of any that would be released for Metal Gear Solid V, with over 10 million views on YouTube. And I promise you, I was at least 5 million of those views. I watched that trailer more times than I can even hope to count. The hype was officially solidified for this game. Following the release of the Red Band trailer, it was announced that Metal Gear Solid V would be split into two parts: Ground Zeroes and The Phantom Pain, with Ground Zero serving as the prologue to the bigger story in The Phantom Pain, setting up crucial plot points and easing us into the circumstances which we would begin with. This video will cover both games as one long story, and I must say, I am incredibly excited to be making this video and to be analyzing one of my most appreciated works of art in my lifetime. But before we begin, I have some disclaimers to make. Before this dive into the rabbit hole that is Metal Gear Solid V, I have a few things I would like to state for the record. This video is not going to be an existentialist commentary about the deep-rooted political prophesizing done by Kojima in this series, as there are countless other channels on YouTube that have already done that, and have done it far better than I ever could for that matter. If you're interested in that topic, then I do recommend checking out those videos, however, as I believe it will only increase your appreciation for this incredible series, as well as potentially give you feelings of utter dread for the future of our society. This video is also going to try to refrain from explaining the overarching plot of Metal Gear Solid when deemed unnecessary, as, if you're familiar with this series, then you know that that task could extend this video to unimaginable lengths. I'm going to attempt to keep this analysis centered on Metal Gear Solid V exclusively. Alas, some explanations will undoubtedly be necessary for the purposes of the plot, but if you're unfamiliar with the lore behind Metal Gear, then bear with me. I will make sure to keep this as straightforward and simple as possible. Lastly, there have been rumors circling the internet since the release of this game in 2015 that it is an unfinished product, or that there is some content missing from the end of the game. I will not be treating this story as unfinished for one reason alone. Kojima himself in an interview stated that this game was, in fact, a finished product upon its release, and that he was happy with the story he told in The Phantom Pain. Bear in mind, Kojima stated this after his split with Konami and all the drama that came with that breakup. He'd already publicly dragged the company before, so if he truly did not feel that way, then there would be no reason to hold back. And, at least for me, that's reason enough to trust him in his word that the story is not unfinished. Now, with that possibly overwhelming sentiment out of the way, let's begin our analysis of Metal Gear Solid V, Ground Zeroes, and The Phantom Pain. Beginning with the prologue, Ground Zeroes. Ground Zeroes takes place 9 years before the events of the Phantom Pain, and it wastes no time throwing the players into the action. In the aftermath of the Peace Walker incident, Paz is missing and presumed dead. Under the direction of Kazuhiro Miller and Huey Emmerich, MSF prepare for an upcoming inspection by the UN, amid suspicions that they possess a nuclear weapon. MSF suspects this to be an attempt by Cypher to stifle them. Their preparations are interrupted when MSF agents in Cuba investigate reports that Paz survived and has been detained at Camp Omega. To complicate matters, Chico's attempts to rescue her also resulted in his capture. Believing that both of them could compromise MSF, Snake is sent to infiltrate Camp Omega to extract them if they are alive and confirm what they revealed to their captors. Snake believes rescuing Paz will convince Cypher to stand down, and that she will be willing to discuss Cypher's activities with MSF. After this brief mission briefing, the players are released into the encampment as Snake and left to their own devices. The entirety of Ground Zeroes takes place in this prison encampment, and it's a rather short experience compared to most games and the Phantom Pain itself, clocking in at around a single hour of runtime. Despite its length, it has a fair bit of replay value, with players obtaining several optional objectives for them to complete if they so wished. This game was released a full year before the Phantom Pain, so the addition of a few side objectives was a nice touch. Ground Zero served its purpose on two fronts. One, to be the prologue to the Phantom Pain, reintroducing the players to Snake, Miller, Paz, and Chico, as well as introducing the players to the main antagonist of Metal Gear Solid V, Skullface. It sets up the events of the Phantom Pain well, ending on a massive cliffhanger that would be addressed in the opening minutes of the Phantom Pain. 2. It gave players their first taste of what an open-world Metal Gear Solid would be like. While it's true that the prison camp is small, it served its purpose as being a virtual playground for people to get their first taste of experimental gameplay perfectly. Ground Zero showed gamers that they truly will have the freedom of choice when approaching missions, and that there is no one perfect solution to the problems presented to them. It's up to them to get creative and complete their missions however best they see fit. Ground Zeroes ends its story with Snake successfully extracting both Chico and Paz and making his way back to Mother Base via helicopter. However, upon their return, they realize that the UN inspection was all a clever ruse by Cypher, and Mother Base is up in flames. The players are now faced with the hard reality of seeing their Mother Base they assembled back in Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker destroyed, with Skullface standing upon its ashes. Snake, Paz, Miller, and Chico attempt to escape from the hellfire, but I've stated before that Metal Gear Solid is all about mind games, and this entry in the series is no different. From here on out, we will be moving forward in the analysis of the Phantom Pain, but just bear in mind that this series is one about fighting against powers that are higher than yourself. It's about challenging your perspective on reality and showing you that existence and truth may coincide, but never intersect. Fighting against the systems in place by men that are hell-bent on keeping both political and physical power to further their own selfish goals. There is always someone behind the scenes pulling the strings of the pawns in which they control, and free will and choice are sometimes an illusion created by those powers. This is the story of the man who sold the world.
Can you hear me? Are you having difficulty speaking?
The first minute of the Phantom Pain sees Snake waking up in the hospital from a coma.
Just nod if you can hear me.
There's clearly some surprise from the nurse and doctor alike, and he asks you,
What is your name? When were you born? Can you recall?
The doctor then has some, let's say, disturbing news for our protagonist.
I need to tell you something. Please listen and try not to panic. You've been in a coma for quite some time. Yes, I know you would like to know how long. I'm afraid it's been 9 years. Damn it!
Snake's body has taken severe damage in the helicopter collision and has 108 pieces of shrapnel lodged in his body as a result, including one sticking out of his head, which ties into the whole men become demons theme Kojima was going for. Players will then create their own avatar for the game that the doctor tells them he will give Snake plastic surgery to look like, but is cut short by those who wish Snake would have never woken up.
Tomorrow, it becomes your phantom.
The entire introduction to the Phantom Pain is a tense and high-action hospital escape where the stakes are monumental.
Who are you? Who am I? You're talking to yourself.
It serves its purpose perfectly as being the hook, line, and sinker to keep you engaged and sets up a major twist later that I will discuss towards the end of the video. Seriously, pay attention to these scenes. You might just come up with a few questions yourself. Everything is as it is for a reason. As I mentioned, the hospital intro serves its purpose as being the hook for players to want to finish the story, but it doesn't really serve well as a tutorial sequence. Everything that transpires in Cyprus is scripted. There is no freedom of choice or open world sandbox to explore. But don't worry, because from here on out the game hands you the reins and tells you to once again take up the mantle as Big Boss, as Snake, and make your thunderous reintroduction to the world. Let them know that legends never die. Welcome to Afghanistan. That intro sequence gives me chills every time. From here on out, how you complete your mission, whether or not you decide to kill or show mercy to the enemy, how your big boss operates.
Well, that's up to you. From here on out, you're on your own.
Long gone are the days of the codec call cutscenes and lengthy exposition dumps that interrupt your tactical espionage action. You were just handed a massive open world playpen equipped with all the toys you could dream of having as a former American super spy. So what will you make of it? Metal Gear Solid V excels in this freedom of choice given to the players and how they complete their missions, and that freedom holds true for endless playthroughs of the game. The first mission alone has you rescuing Kaz from a Soviet outpost. As you make your way towards your former comrade, you will come across a Soviet stronghold, where you will find intel on the outpost where Kaz is being held, if you so wish to give yourself as many advantages as possible against a yet unknown enemy. Players can, of course, choose to not infiltrate this stronghold at all, and instead go straight for Kaz, but in turn they will not discover that intel can be a great weapon in times of war. Players can find intel like this scattered throughout the map, which will reveal the location of enemies, supply trucks making their route through Soviet camps, and even the location of valuable resources to help players build up their mother base once again. Metal Gear Solid V has players balancing completing and completing various missions they can assign themselves and regrowing their private army to take on Skullface. Players can scout enemy soldiers and eventually see their skill levels in different fields that would be useful for your private army. If you like what you see from a soldier, just equip a silenced, tranquilizer sniper rifle and attach this little balloon to his backpack. He'll be back at your mother base in no time. Just a mild stomachache after that violent ascent. The game allows you to play however you want, but it's almost a shame to go guns blazing all the time and potentially miss out on some really highly skilled new recruits from Mother Base. In fact, the game almost encourages you to build up your army first and then go in guns blazing if you so choose. In one of the early missions, you're tasked with finding a Russian translator so you can have subtitles display on the screen when you're in earshot of some enemies. Once you can understand what they're saying, you realize that just spouting classified information is just the norm sometimes in the Soviet army, apparently. Additionally, as players progress through the game and begin recruiting soldiers with better skill sets, they can begin sending them out on missions of their own to gain some extra resources to fund their own missions. Once a proper research and development team has been installed back at your mother base, you can also begin researching new weapons and equipment to play with out in the open world. including this upgraded Fulton recovery system, which instead of a balloon, opens a literal portal to another dimension to bring recruits back to Mother Base. The longer you play this game, the more you will realize the attention to detail Kojima and his team put into the world. Exploring Mother Base after recruiting some fresh meat for the cause was always one of my favorite things to do. As well as this nonsense where you can walk up to anybody you've recruited and fucking Jackie Chan them over your shoulder and they get up and say this.
Thank you, boss.
Your commands when you take an enemy hostage won't work if you don't have an interpreter for that soldier's mother language. You can intercept supply trucks and climb on board and sneak your way to an enemy compound that way. If you know that a supply truck is going to an outpost, you can intercept it before it gets there because that just means more reinforcements. You can call a supply drop to fall right on the boss's head you're fighting, which will deal damage to them and even stun them momentarily for you to get a shot off. You can take a shower in this game, which really blurs the line between fantasy and reality for me and solidifies it into its own category above the rest of video games. Bonus points for not being as long as Death Stranding showers. Before every mission you undertake, you're greeted with this preparation screen where you can choose to play as Snake or one of your recruited soldiers if you want. You can select the appropriate camouflage for Snake depending what kind of terrain you'll be in, the type of guns you want to take with you, you know, the lethal or the sleepy time kind. You can equip various types of prosthetic arms that each do something wacky and different. You can select which buddy you want to take with you. If you prefer going in solo, you can equip D-Horse and simply arrive at your objective faster. D-Dog can scout the areas ahead of you and automatically mark enemies that you might have missed, and you can even send him in to knock out or kill enemies for you.
Don't you die on me, damn it!
Of all the weapons you can use in the game though, the one with the most tactical advantage has got to be the squirt gun.
Spit it out.
The map has been updated.
Enemies in this game show some serious intelligence as well. If you're caught breaking into one outpost, then the entire region of the map gets put on alert, not just that outpost you're caught in. And remember when I said intelligence can be a powerful weapon for the player? That actually works both ways. If you take on more missions in the various areas of the game, the enemies will also begin to learn your patterns of attack, creating a gameplay experience where you have to constantly adapt to the improvements in security made by the enemy. If you play more of a sniper style, enemies will begin wearing bulletproof helmets. If you operate mostly in the dark of night, enemies will begin wearing night vision goggles, and I think the coolest thing is they will actually begin using decoys after you unlock them yourself. The decoys mislead and stress the player out and makes them question everything they see in the distance. Some are even rigged to explode if you accidentally shoot them, so you will really have to learn to tell the difference between these guys and the real deal. The gameplay of Metal Gear Solid V gets absolutely zero complaints from me. It is a tactical sandbox of opportunity and possibility which allow players to get as creative as their brains will let them. If you can think it, you can do it in this game. If I had to, I would nitpick that I wish there were more types of terrain to explore, as the game takes place in one of two primary locations, Soviet-controlled Afghanistan and a multi-faction controlled Africa. But that sense of being on your own behind enemy lines and handed a massive virtual sandbox to experiment and have fun with more than makes up for any nitpicking that I could do in that department. Also the fact that this might be the only game where you can call in air support blaring Kids of America while absolutely shredding a horde of enemy soldiers, and that is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Approaching position.
Now let's get into the controversial side of the Phantom Pain. The story. As I mentioned before, I will not be treating this game as incomplete because Kojima himself stated that he was happy with the finalized product that was Metal Gear Solid V, and that it was in fact a finished game. People call this game incomplete because the ending did not tie up every single loose end for some of the characters directly following the events of the Phantom Pain, but it didn't need to. The point of this game was to set up the events that would transpire before the very first Metal Gear that was released on the NES and MSX2. Every single one of these games falls under the same plot lines and follows the same characters. They just tell the story out of order. Think of the Star Wars movies and how they're chronologically out of order but still connect. The fact of the matter is, Kojima didn't need to tie up every single loose end in this game, because we still know the fate of each of these characters and what happens to them courtesy of the other games in the series. The real important question that Kojima raised at the beginning of this story, and the one that he answered at the end, is, who is the man who sold the world? And more importantly, how did Big Boss fall from grace as a noble and good-intentioned man combating the war machine to a global terrorist who needed to be stopped for the sake of the future? And oh boy, did this game answer those questions. The entire first act of the game is about rebuilding your private army, now named Diamond Dogs, while simultaneously completing story missions to pursue and kill Skullface. This mission sees Diamond Dogs undertaking jobs through both Afghanistan and Africa, where Snake uncovers global conspiracies by Skullface to recruit child soldiers to his cause, and the creation of a new Metal Gear by Skullface and your own ally, Huey Emmerich, Sahelanthropus. On top of all the bad news, you discover that there is a top-secret vocal cord parasite being researched and experimented with on the people of Africa, a parasite that attaches itself to the vocal cords of those it infects and can be trained to kill the host when it recognizes a specific language being spoken. Skullface says himself in the final confrontation with Snake that a philosopher
once said, "It is no nation we inhabit, but a language. Make no mistake, our native tongue is our true fatherland."
After defeating Skullface, Diamond Dogs claims the Metal Gear for themselves, and in a more Hollywood-esque story, the game would have ended right then and there. After all, the hero won the battle, claimed the treasure, and can now ride into the sunset knowing his mission was a success. But an ending like that is too conventional for a franchise like Metal Gear. Right when you think it's all over, you realize it's only just begun. Kojima still had an ace up his sleeve for the final act of this game, as he has for every game that came before. One that would hold up the black mirror to the player and reveal to them the true underlying theme of this game. Identity. Not long after defeating Skullface and assumedly ridding the world of the threat of vocal cord parasites, there is one last outbreak of them at Mother Base. The player spent the entire game building up this private army and recruiting soldiers to their cause, thinking of nothing but stats on a menu screen and how profitable it may be to have these individuals on their side. Now, they must tear down what they've built and are tasked with killing off every single last person who has been infected, showing no mercy to those who are willing to fight for you to help you achieve your goal of revenge. This is a powerful and disturbing scene to play through, and will make you think of all those times you sent your soldiers out on missions to further your own selfish goals, not once considering the human lives you were putting at risk, all for the benefit of the war machine to keep chugging forward. This arc of the game drives home the anti-war themes that Metal Gear Solid has written all over it. In war, there are no happy endings. Violence only gives rise to more violence. All it takes is one act of hatred to spread like a cancer. As Snake says at the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 4, war never changes. And the penultimate story in Metal Gear Solid V closes with Big Boss wiping the ashes of the people in the quarantine platform across his face, declaring that they'll make diamonds
from their ashes. Take them into battle with us.
A shining light, even in death.
How's he doing?
Well, he stabilized, but it took too long. He's in a coma.
What about him?
He, took some shrapnel to the head.
The final black mirror in the game reveals the hidden truths that have been lingering all along. Right from the beginning, you've been lied to. You've been used, manipulated, and thrown to the wolves as bait while the real hero lurks in the background. Mission 46 in the game is titled Truth, and in this mission you will replay the hospital escape sequence from the beginning of the game. But this time, all those little things that didn't make sense before come full circle. As it happens, the lovable hero Big Boss, who the players thought they were playing as through the course of the story, is actually off on a top-secret mission to rebuild Outer Heaven, his true private army that the world does not know about. The player, on the other hand, has been playing as a nobody this entire time, a body double for Snake that was given plastic surgery and hypnosis to believe that he was Big Boss.
This one, he'll take your place. From here on, he's Snake. He believes it, too. My very own Phantom, huh?
and the clever ruse by Kojima rears its ugly head. Players will spend the course of this game listening to cassette tapes instead of codec calls that recap all of Big Boss's previous accolades and achievements. You now realize that this was used on purpose as a hypnosis technique. Every cassette you were handed, every mission you undertook, you were training to become Big Boss. You were fighting a phantom enemy. You were used as bait for the world to fight against, while the real Big Boss looked on from the safety of his new private army. You were the Big Boss the players would kill in the very first Metal Gear for the NES. That is the truth of the man who sold the world. One of the major points Metal Gear Solid tries to drive home is that anybody could have been Snake under different circumstances. The name is just an old war story created to inspire people to continue fighting, when the heroes of the story are trying to tear down that very ideology. That is the story of how Big Boss became a villain. He manipulated the very people that promised to fight for him to create a better future. He treated his people the exact same way he was treated by the American government. The very treatment that caused him to abandon the US and begin fighting on his own terms for a peaceful future. Metal Gear Solid V shows the player that it was never for peace, only for revenge. This game was the final missing link in the Metal Gear story loop, and if this was truly the last time we'll see Kojima behind a Metal Gear game, then what an incredible journey it was through the years. If you haven't played this series, I cannot stress enough that it is absolutely worth your time, as the games are a thesis statement on an anti-war future for our society with serious political undertones that ring true today despite the games being as old as they are. In 2022, this message couldn't have been more desperately required by the governments of our world. Maybe it's time to put down the gun and live. If you made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you so much for watching and sharing in my passion for this series. If you like this video, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button, as there are many more videos and analyses to be made about the hundreds of games that resonated with me on some level. So really, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.